The first time you heard him, it felt like a light was being poured into a dark room. The camera framed a slender boy in a simple shirt, chin lifted, hands trembling just enough to prove he was human. And then that voice rose, a silver thread cutting through the noise of our age. It was unshakable and tender at once, the kind of singing that makes strangers hold their breath together, as if the air itself had turned sacred. On Britain's Got Talent, Malakai Bayoh seemed to arrive not as an overnight sensation, but as something older, an echo from choir lofts and candlelit chapels, from the long memory of English music and the quiet resilience of children who carry more than we think they do. He sang, and a nation remembered what mercy feels like. By the time the golden confetti fell, a child had become a symbol, one astonishing high note at a time, and millions felt a little less alone. If their work has ever moved you, leave a like as a small tribute before we start. But beneath the glow of that moment, beneath the triumph that makes for clips and headlines, there was a bruise. You could sense it in the way Malachi steadied himself after the applause, in how he blinked back a flood of feeling he couldn't quite name. There was a shadow stitched to his success, a memory of a night when a grown adult booed a child for daring to sing, the ticking clock every treble hears when he's honest with himself, the harsh wind of misinformed rumors that always, somehow, find the most fragile voices. Before we praise him, then, let us do something harder. Look kindly at the storm he walked through and the ones that still gather at the edge of the stage. Because sometimes the heartbreaking tragedy is not a single headline. It's the slow, invisible cost of being beautiful in public at an age when most kids are allowed to be awkward in private. Here, in the present day, is where the glow meets the grit. After a season of TV glory, a debut album, and a string of major stages, a deeper darkness circles, a quieter anxiety you only hear if you listen past the cheers, the knowledge that a boy's treble cannot last, voices grow, bodies change. The instrument that carried him into the world will change shape whether the world is ready or not. Around him, the internet machine spins, edits of his high note next to compilations of audience tears, thumbnails, thunder, tragedy, even when the tragedy is just growing up under a spotlight. And yet he keeps singing, keeps studying, keeps walking on stage with the kind of poise most adults would envy. What happens when the most delicate instrument on earth, a child's voice, is asked to score the noise of our times? What do you owe a gift that may vanish and return as something entirely new? If you listened closely to the interviews, you heard it in the subtext: joy braided to a kind of fear, resilience learning to carry the unknown without flinching. On some nights in 2024, he sang to mark national remembrance, and the country answered with silence and gratitude. On others, he posted from rehearsals that showed not a prodigy, but a student, curious, disciplined, moving forward measure by measured measure. To understand his present, we have to start with the room that made his voice. Picture a London flat where homework fights with sheet music for table space, where a mother calls out reminders over the low hum of the city, where mornings smell like toast and the cotton-clean scent of an ironed school shirt. Imagine the walk to choir rehearsal. The same streets, the same corner shop, the same small ritual of stepping into a quiet building that somehow held more sky than outside. Inside St. George's Cathedral, London, he learned what music can do to a person, how a single note rings against stone, how a harmony threads across time and finds you even when you are too young to name the ache it fulfills. Choir life is a pattern stitched into days, cassocks folded and refolded, Latin vowels shaped carefully by a director's hand, the crisp scratch of pencil marks on a score that looks like a star map. In those rooms, boys learn obedience to beauty. They learn that silence is not emptiness, but readiness, that the breath you take before a phrase is a promise you must keep. He carried that promise home each evening, a little taller in spirit, even on days his backpack felt heavier than his body. School, too, mattered. Cardinal Vaughan Memorial School, with its crowded corridors and jokes tossed across the lunch line, a place where a talented boy could still be just a boy. There were friends who peeked at his rehearsal videos and grinned because they saw him. That quiet kid who liked football and snacks and laughing too loud in the wrong hallway, and teachers who offered both rigor and shelter. The choir of the school, Schola Cantorum, gave him brothers in music, faces that changed each term but carried the same bright intent, boys who knew the weird, lovely ache of nailing a chord so perfect you had to look down and pretend to tie your shoe so no one saw your eyes water. The home, the school, the sacred space. These were the three rooms that shaped him. Not fame, not cameras. Rooms full of human-scale tenderness and a discipline that can be mistaken for austerity until you realize it's just the gentlest way to honor something you love. And yet, even in those rooms, the first wounds arrive early. A treble learns the value of breath and, with it, the weight of expectation. There is the day your range climbs higher than your friends, and you feel taller than your age. There is the day a rehearsal goes wrong and you carry the sour echo home like a scar that no one can see. There is the first hint that the clock will have its say, some faint heaviness in the throat, a note that used to sit like light on your tongue now needing a little reach. Childhood talents invite adult standards long before you get adult protections. More than once, he must have come home to the usual mess of a growing boys' room, trainers in a corner, a cracked phone screen, a notebook with doodles and grand plans, and wondered if his gift would still be there in the morning. This is the crucible no one talks about, how you put yourself to bed when the thing you love might be changing without your permission. Before the TV break, there were other stages, church services, local concerts, small parts in operas that demand more poise than their pay, the odd winter performance where you can't feel your fingers and the summer ones where sweat stings your eyes. He sang a boy's roles, written by men long dead, stepping into centuries of story as if they were rooms in that same quiet building. In 2022, a line of Handel in the Royal Opera House invited him into the grown-up game. Lights, cues, a conductor's raised eyebrow that means, "Ready?" He was ready. And then came a shock. A heckler's shout from the dark, the word rubbish slung like a stone across centuries of art, aimed not at a note, but at a child. He stood his ground. Others shushed. The man was removed, then later banned for life, the institution choosing to defend the dignity of the stage. But some part of that night stayed with him. How could it not? The first cruelty you meet in a sacred place leaves a mark. It teaches you how quickly mercy can drain from a room, and how strong you must be to call it back with your own voice. He kept going. Small shows turned into bigger ones, rehearsals stacked into stamina. Criticism sharpened his ear rather than weaponizing his fear. The early hustle for a singer that young is not the cliché of dim clubs and rejected demos. It's slower, more hidden. It is scales in the morning and homework at lunch. It is choosing rest when the world begs for one more post. It is learning to say no to opportunities that would look excellent on a feed but bad on a report card. These are the invisible years, even when they happen in public. He endured them without drama, building musculature where other prodigies go brittle. Invisible in a world obsessed with spotlights is perhaps too neat a line for a boy who actually preferred the rehearsal room to the red carpet. But it fits the feeling. He was making a life, not just a moment. Then the door opened. television lights, an audition hall already crowded with our hope that something rare might happen again. He walked out and began Pi Jesu, an aria so transparent that it cannot be faked. The camera moved in. The judges leaned forward like parishioners. He was not flawless, but he was true. He was not a miniature adult performing a perfect trick. He was a child singing with courage inside the vulnerable, luminous limits of a child's instrument. When the golden buzzer dropped, it felt less like surprise than affirmation, the show's machinery blessing what the room already knew. And that's when everything changed. Suddenly the numbers surged, the interviews queued up, the word angelic attached itself to his name like a permanent adjective. Yet the boy remained, shy smiles, honest delight, and an evident gratitude that disarmed even the snarkiest corners of the internet. The summit, when it came, was not a cliff, but a long, bright ridge, a recording contract, a debut album called Golden that by most accounts lived up to its name, soaring, prayerful tracks shaped by real musical care, the kind of record that makes both grandmothers and teenagers text a link to someone they love. It climbed charts in the UK classical world and, astonishingly, across the Atlantic too. There were bigger halls, the Royal Albert Hall, a prom's debut in front of thousands, appearances that tied his voice to national memory like the D-Day 85th anniversary, performances meant not to show off, but to serve. You could watch a child grow into a servant of the song itself. Work ethic and wonder coexisted. He wasn't above enjoying the thrill of it, but you sensed he knew the difference between attention and meaning. In an age that measures worth by views, his greatest applause seemed to be the hush that followed his last note. Behind the summit, as ever, there were shadows. That night at Covent Garden was more than an incident. It was a lesson in how quickly cruelty finds a microphone. Even after the lifetime ban for the heckler, the story lingered, reminder and warning both. For a child, such memories have a way of returning in quiet moments, a sudden lurch of the stomach as you step on stage, a shadow that travels with you like an uninvited companion. Add to that the ordinary changes all children face, schoolwork mounting, friendships shifting as fame rearranged the balance of things, the odd, awkward silence where a friend doesn't know whether to joke or defer. There were surely private tears on nights when the voice didn't sit right, a soreness that felt like a betrayal, a fear that the instrument might break before it bloomed into its next form. The internet did what it always does, praised, then pried, then presumed. Even in 2024, videos with solemn titles dangled unverified tragedies, playing the algorithm's game with a child's life. Those close to him kept their counsel, and wisely so. The cost of public adolescence is high enough without strangers inventorying your soul, yet through it all he kept going. Rehearsals, lessons, and a steady practice of showing up on real stages where excellence, not rumor, rules the air. But here's where it gets complicated. Fame offered a megaphone. Childhood asked for a whisper. People wanted his highest notes. Biology promised that those notes would change. The show made him a symbol. His life insisted he remain a son, a friend, a student, a boy, responsible not just for an art, but for a future. Philanthropy invited him to sing for causes, and perhaps he did, quietly, without press, because voice as prayer has always been the truest currency in these stories. At the same time, exhaustion is not a sin, but a signal. Every yes steals sleep from a child who still has to sit a math test in the morning. The public smile can be real and still cost something. The interviews we did see were calm, measured, grateful. What we didn't see were the negotiations that protect a minor from being over-harvested by an industry that loves prodigies and forgets them the minute they cannot perform their miracle on demand. Parents, teachers, managers, these were his sentries, building a little fort of sanity around a gift the world wanted to rent by the hour. And if some days he wished for anonymity again, who could blame him? Now, if you're wondering, what is actually known and what is myth? Here's the careful answer. It is publicly documented that Malakai received Simon Cowell's Golden Buzzer on Britain's Got Talent in 2023, advanced to the final, and went on to release a debut album, Golden, with Universal/Decca, that reached #1 on the UK classical chart and even topped Billboard's traditional classical albums in the US. It's also a matter of record that in 2022, during Handel's Alcina at the Royal Opera House, a lone audience member shouted "rubbish" at the 12-year-old singer and was subsequently banned for life, an incident widely reported and condemned. In June 2024, he sang a moving "Abide With Me" in connection with the D-Day 85th observances, a performance shared and praised by classical outlets. Beyond these facts, rumors in 2024 of some catastrophic downfall appear to be the ordinary churn of the internet rumor mill, melodramatic thumbnails grasping for clicks. Sources close to the singer have kept things appropriately private. There have been no credible reports of the kind of tragedy the loudest headlines imply. The real heartbreak is more intimate and universal. The precariousness of a boy's treble and the pressure of carrying it through seasons where most kids are allowed to stumble unseen. Which brings us back to love and its scaffolding. There is the mother who insists on homework before headlines, the family member who knows how to make him laugh when a rehearsal goes wrong, the friend who texts a meme before a show and a prayer emoji after. There are the colleagues, conductors and accompanists, who treat him not like a novelty, but like a musician among musicians. There is the found family of choirs, the strange and beautiful brotherhood of boys who learn to blend their sounds into something larger than any one life. And there are the elders, too, figures like Aled Jones, who speak across generations about the path from treble to man's voice, about how a gift can evolve rather than vanish. It matters that these conversations are happening in the open. It teaches the public to watch with patience rather than demand that a 13-year-old stay 13 forever. If you watched closely during interviews, you saw how gratitude softened the pressure, how humility steadied the climb. The love in this story is not a romance arc. It's the quieter love of adults who remember that protecting childhood is not a quaint idea. It's the entire point. Classic FM. So where is he now, today, in the battle only he can fight? On many days, he stands on a threshold, taking the measure of a voice that is likely shifting, preparing, guided by teachers, to find its next home. He may be exploring range, experimenting with repertoire that respects a changing instrument, leaning into musicianship that endures when a single note won't soar the way it once did. He continues to appear on serious stages, often in ensemble with the school and cathedral communities that raised him. Sometimes he steps forward for a solo that suits where he is today, not where the internet wants him to be. He is learning, in other words, the art of continuity. Will the world listen with the same mercy if the sound changes? Will we honor the musician even when the miracle reimagines itself? He is answering those questions one rehearsal at a time, singing less to prove something than to discover what remains. And what remains, it turns out, is a great deal. The phrasing, the musical intelligence, the unteachable poise, the patience to take care rather than take shortcuts. In recent seasons, the proms stage and other major platforms have not been the finish line so much as another classroom, an arena in which to practice steadiness under bright lights. This is what it looks like to grow up well in public. Not a scandal, not a crash, but a series of brave, careful choices. The truth is, the tragedy that titles like to sell is simply the thing everyone who loves a treble already knows. The voice that once seemed to hold heaven's light will change, and we will have to recognize it again when it returns in a different register. For audiences, this can be haunting, like watching the tide pull back from a beach you thought belonged to you. For the singer, it is more than haunting. It is personal. You feel the new weight in your throat, and you have to decide to call it a teacher rather than a thief. Those who have walked this road remind him, it is not an ending, but a crossing. The music does not abandon you. It asks you to meet it at a new door. If he becomes a tenor or a countertenor or something that surprises even his coaches, the boy who learned to honor silence and shape it into song will still be there. The light changes color. It does not go out. And yet, we should be honest. Growing up under the gaze of millions leaves scars. Even praise can turn into pressure. Even love can feel like a demand you can't possibly meet. There is the quiet grief of saying goodbye to a sound the world convinced you was your identity. There is the quieter, braver joy of discovering that your identity was never just a sound. In vulnerable seasons, it helps to remember the rooms that raised you, the cathedral loft, where mercy first felt like music, the school rehearsal where a conductor's calm voice taught you to breathe through fear, the living room where family made you laugh so hard the burden slipped for a minute and you were just a kid again. These are the anchors he seems to carry with unshowy grace, and in the places that matter, the work continues. Solfege, scales, ear training, the study of scores that will outlive all of us. The boy who sang Pai Jesu for a television audience has become a young musician studying how to serve music for a lifetime. That's not a collapse. That's a calling. In the end, the legacy is already visible even if the career is still being written. He reminded a famously distracted country that silence can be holy, that the human voice, especially a young one, can make strangers share a single breath. He gave families a memory they can agree on in an age of disagreement. Remember that boy? Remember how we all went quiet? He helped, in a small but not trivial way, to keep alive a lineage of sacred and classical repertoire that requires new hearts each generation. And he did it while carrying himself with the kind of dignity that turns applause into blessing rather than fuel for the next dopamine spike. If that is not legacy, what is? So, a benediction for a singer on the cusp. May the storms that circle stay at a respectful distance. May the light that found him in a TV studio find him in practice rooms and hard days, too. May he be granted the tender courage to let go of what must be let go and the unshakable resilience to welcome what's next. May the rooms that raised him, family, school, choir, continue to hold him with wisdom and good humor. And may we, the audience, learn to be more than consumers, to listen with mercy, to celebrate the artist rather than hoard the miracle, to accept that the most beautiful gifts in life arrive for a time and then change, and that this is not loss, but life. If Malakai's voice once carried you through a difficult hour, feel free to share a supportive comment below, and before you go, don't forget to hit like as a gesture of tribute. For the boy who sang like a bell in winter, and for the young artist learning, bravely, to carry his light into spring.